Well, joining us now, former Pensions Minister Baroness Altmann. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Lots to talk to you about, but I wonder if we could just start with that. Should the Prime Minister apologise at the dispatch box, given that's where he first came up with the slur?
My own view is absolutely he should. Absolutely he should. And I remember during my time as minister that I was hauled over the coals for apologising for something I said, which I felt was perhaps a little bit misleading or said something that wasn't quite right. And I was told ministers don't apologise. And I still do not understand why, if one has said something that has been maybe taken the wrong way or caused offence, even if you didn't mean to do that, you can't just say sorry. It's what we teach our children. For the sake of family harmony, even if you don't really think what you said was wrong, when you get to the point where everything is all stoked up, you just need to say, I'm sorry for the sake of family harmony. And we've got a country here that is really clearly, there are some angers that people are boiling over. There's a real feeling of tension across the country. And if an apology can calm things down, why would you not do that as a leader of the country?
Why do you think he won't?
I must admit that I find it really, truly puzzling, because I don't think that he meant to cause the kind of hatred and vitriol that has been apparently stoked up by this. And I do understand, actually, that Sir Keir Starmer was the leader of the CPS at the time, but we all know he was not personally involved in the decision. And Sir Keir Starmer at the time apologised and took responsibility for being the leader of an office where mistakes were made. I think that's usually what one would expect somebody at the top to do if they believe that people have felt, if you like, let down or done something that would be helped by an apology.
Totally understand. I wonder if I trouble you for a couple of thoughts on pensions. First of all, MPs voting through a pension rise that will be outstripped by inflation yesterday, and the Chancellor's removed the triple lock. Thoughts on that?
Well, I was leading a rebellion in the House of Lords, and we put a very reasonable compromise to the government that would allow the keeping of the earnings link in the triple lock. It's the earnings protection that has been abandoned and has caused so much problem. And unfortunately, MPs in the Commons voted against that. It would have given a much fairer increase to both the state pension and what's called the pension credit, which is the top-up that the poorest pensioners live on, which has always been increased in line with earnings. And suddenly, because earnings rose very fast during the pandemic, the link was dropped. I think that was a terrible decision. I would love to see the government go back on its decision, but I don't think there's any chance of that. And practically, it's probably too late to change the systems. But pensioners are going to struggle. The poorest pensioners in particular have been shortchanged. They were promised the protection that has been taken away. And I just don't agree with that policy, I'm afraid.
And I also wondered if you had a thought on suggestions from Labour that a windfall tax would be the right way forward for some of these oil companies in order to try to bring down energy bills for those that need it most. The flip side to that is the government is saying that a lot of pension funds invest in things like BP, Shell, etc., etc., etc. So it could impact on pensioners in that direction. Do you think that's a reasonable argument?
Well, I think one can go a little bit too far on the issue of worrying about whether or not you should impose taxation policy because of what's happening in pension funds. But I do think that one has to be careful not to take away the ability of our biggest energy companies to invest in clean energy. I think that the move to net zero is right. I hope the government does not row back on that. And I don't see signs yet that the government is doing that, although there is some pressure trying to encourage that. And there are a lot of companies that have done extraordinarily well out of both the pandemic and the central bank policies of creating new money, which has inflated asset prices and shares and property. So, there is a case for saying that if you need to raise large sums in taxation, one should look to raise that from a broader base, which has benefited, rather than the national insurance increase, which I fundamentally disagree with, which places an extra burden on the lower earners whose pay packets will be falling this April at the same time as the cost of living is soaring. So, yes, I think there is a case for broadening the base from which one takes extra taxation. Clearly, we need extra public money to invest and shore up both the health service and particularly social care, which is still being left out. But whether or not you should single out the oil companies who we need, I mean, we can see geopolitically, Russia is threatening to cut off gas to the West potentially. Yeah. And there is a real problem because of our dependence on forms of energy that are not necessarily controlled in this country. And we need to invest in environmentally friendly energy sources. The best people to do that are probably some of the bigger energy companies. Okay. So I just don't think we should single out one sector in particular.
Okay. Baroness Altmann, fascinating. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.